Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Blake Bauer. Blake is the author of the international bestseller, You Were Not Born to Suffer. A sought-after teacher and speaker, Blake has helped over 100,000 people find the healing and clarity they couldn't access through traditional psychology or medicine. His work blends psychology, neuroscience, Chinese medicine, mindfulness, and energy healing into a practical approach for overcoming suffering and creating a purposeful, healthy, and fulfilling life. Blake's work was born from his own personal challenges, outwardly succeeding as a top athlete while quietly battling drug addiction, anxiety, childhood trauma, and suicidal depression. Today, he is known for his rare combination of vulnerability, wisdom, and actionable guidance, helping audiences move past their fear and self-doubt to build a more loving and empowered relationship with themselves. Wow, Blake, I am so excited to dive into this conversation today. So welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you today?
I'm really well. Thank you, Ash. I'm excited to be here too.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. We were chatting just before we started recording and I was saying I feel like there's so many similarities in our stories. You even actually lived in Geelong for 5 years, which is kind of just around the corner from us here in Melbourne. And yeah, just your story and your journey, I think it's going to resonate so deeply with our listeners. So let's just dive straight in, shall we? I want to know, where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
Well, that's a loaded question. Today I'm in Los Angeles and I travel quite a bit. I'm here about 70% of my time. And then I also spend a lot of time in Chicago and that's where I grew up. And then in the mountains in Colorado, I teach retreats every couple months there. And so I orbit between Los Angeles, Chicago, and Colorado. What does a typical day look like for me? I like to get good sleep. And then when I wake up in the morning, I like to do breathing and meditation in bed and spend some time just with my body and with my breath. And I think we're going to get into this, but meditation is something that saved my life. And the morning time is for me the most powerful and the most important time. So I always like to check in with my whole being in the morning and spend time doing that. And then coffee is one of my favorite things on the planet and my primary vice these days. And so I drink a lot of coffee in the morning and then start to get into emails and work. And I like to make it to the gym every day. I love to exercise and, get the blood and the energy and the good chemistry flowing. And then it varies. I have a lot of projects going on. So each day can vary a little bit in terms of the tasks that are in front of me.
Okay, let's talk about this meditation in the morning for just a moment.
Yes.
I have been going recently through this internal battle. I've been meditating really consistently for about 6 years now. But recently, I've been having this almost inner negotiation in my mind when I wake up in the morning, and it goes something like this. You don't have to meditate today. Actually, what we could do is we could just do it a little bit later. Let's have a coffee first. No, Ash, you know that if you have a coffee before you meditate, it disrupts your meditation. Anyway, I just go on and on and on and on. And then I just eventually, most of the time, just get myself into my seat and I meditate before I have my coffee. But tell me, why do you find it so important to meditate first thing in the morning?
I love that. I can absolutely relate. So just know you're not alone in that because I look forward to my coffee so much. So for me, this journey began about 23 years ago. I was suffering very deeply. And so I would wake up in the morning and I was very tortured mentally and emotionally and paranoid and lost and confused. And so when I learned to sit down and focus on my breathing and focus on my body and a particular meditation technique, it was the first time in my life and in my life where I was self-aware and aware of my own pain and my own suffering, where I could learn to detach from my thoughts and realize like I wasn't my thoughts, I wasn't the voices in my head, and I didn't need to be the victim of these painful thoughts anymore. And I started to train myself, at a young age to come back to my breathing and come back to my body. And for me, every morning that was so important for me because when I would wake up, I would feel so anxious and I would want to run, but I didn't know where I wanted to run, but I just wanted to get away from myself. And I felt ashamed of the fact that I was suffering so much. And, there's a phrase I love that all sickness is homesickness. And I was not at home in myself and I just wanted to keep running away. And prior to that, I had used drugs and alcohol and food and everything I could find to numb out. And so I was in this place of knowing I don't want to hurt myself anymore. And I also don't want to run from myself. So I have to do something different. And so meditation became this life saving practice for me when I was 18. And that's when I started to understand that the thoughts you think first thing in the morning create and shape your day and thus create and shape your life. So the morning time is the most powerful time to practice. And then as you get into neuroscience and brain science, you start to realize that the thoughts you're thinking in the morning are activating specific parts of your brain and causing your nervous system to be regulated or dysregulated, causing
Mm.
cortisol to fill your bloodstream or not. So I started to realize I'm either making myself sick before I get out of bed, or I'm learning to not make myself sick with my thinking right when I
Mm.
wake up in the morning. And so really meditating in the morning saved my life. And so that's, when I'm teaching, I say to people, like, if you could do one thing different, this is the one thing that could change everything the most. And it only needs to be 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be 30 minutes. It doesn't need to be an hour. We just need that little bit of time to not chase the wild horses, the old programming, and be the victim of that old software, that old program that is harming us, that we got from our parents, that we got from society, that we developed to survive. That's really a reactive mind. And really, that was the one thing that helped me more than anything. And I think gave me the ability to help so many people. So,
Thank you for sharing that. It's just I so relate to that. And the idea of some days waking up and you're just a little off and you may not even be able to place meaning on the why of that, but you have two choices. You can start the day feeling off and then living your whole day in that discontented, dysregulated state of being, or you can take the 10 minutes. Like you said, I love that. Come back to yourself, come home to your body, reach that balance, that homeostasis, and then you get to start your day on an even playing field and be more mindful of how you want to show up in the world and how you want to experience and live your day as well. Love that, Blake. Thank you.
mm.
All right. Let's find out, what do you do for fun?
That's a good question. I enjoy life now in general. So life is fun for me. One thing we can get into is this idea that I think life is a miracle that we take for granted. And if you're mindful and aware of the miracle, the whole thing is a miracle, from
Mm.
coffee to meditation to brushing your teeth, whatever you have to do. But I love to work out. I love to exercise. I really enjoy that. I love catching up with a good friend that I have a very deep, soulful connection with. I love to travel. I love good music. I love to have coffee in the sun. So I like to have coffee throughout the day. So like sitting outside in the sun, people watching, having coffee. I love that. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And is travel something that you've created? Is that a part of your life that you've essentially manifested, or is that something that you always did and were always drawn to?
Well, I am a double Sagittarius, if you know anything about astrology, and we like to travel. But I
Yeah,
moved away from home when I was 18, and then I moved to Australia when I was 24. And then I started touring Australia with my book. And then I started touring London and the US. So I've been on the road for, a long time, for 20, almost 25 years. And
yeah.
yeah, I do. I enjoy traveling. It helps me to keep perspective, when you don't get stuck in one place for too long. I love to go and connect with other people. And, now my work has grown in a way where I go to another country and then I just drop in and get present. And then I bring people home in another city or another
Mm,
country. And, when you're loving yourself and you're in alignment with your true self, and I think with life, you find that life supports you and you have this wind at your back because you're doing good work and you're doing life serving work. And so
yes.
life really shows up and supports that.
Absolutely. You move into this flow state, and I think that's always been a real sign for me. If I'm where I'm meant to be, if I'm trusting the universe, then life will flow. And if I'm really pushing up against resistance and things just aren't seeming to work, no matter how hard I try, in inverted commas, then that's a sign that that path is not meant for me. And I'm the same with travel. I think travel is something, I almost call it a value of mine. Like, I love to be able to see the world, experience the world, always having the next destination planned, booked, so that I've got I think it just brings such texture and color to our lives. And I'm in the same position. Building a life that allows me to do that is something that I've only been able to do in this last chapter of my life, where I've, lent into these practices, got clean and sober, started to really meditate, manifest, and really tap into that life source and that energy. So I'm excited to talk a little more about that as well, Blake. But let's now talk about your photo, because Blake, I've asked you to bring in a photo today, a photo from a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile. So you were presenting one version of yourself externally, but internally you were struggling. Could you please describe for our listeners the photo I'm bringing up on the screen right now? What are we looking at here, and what was really going on for you at that time in your life?
Yeah. So this is a loaded story and a loaded photo. So for those of you who can't see it, I'm standing with a friend of mine and we've covered his face. And I think I'm 16 or 17 there. And I'm holding a little black lab puppy. And the story behind that puppy is that my best friend, who I was very close to, wanted to get his girlfriend a puppy. And we went to the orphanage to look for a puppy and to adopt a dog. And then obviously they asked, how old are you? And we were 16 or 17. And they said, I'm sorry, but you can't adopt the puppy. And so, I just start walking out, and I was there actually just being a good friend. And my best friend grabbed the puppy and ran and stole the puppy. Me being a very good friend, I just ran too, and we were driving in his car, and it was like a scene from a movie. He threw the keys to me, and I grabbed them with one hand just in the flow. I got in the driver's seat of his car, and we proceeded to drive away with this puppy. And I, again, was just being a good friend, and we got chased by the staff, and we actually ended up getting away. And that picture was taken with the puppy at his house. And we took the puppy to his girlfriend's house, and his mother said there's no way she can have this puppy. So my buddy ended up getting stuck with this puppy, but it actually led to us getting arrested and getting in a lot of trouble.
I was going to say, did that end up, did you commit a felony by stealing a puppy?
We did get, thank God we were young, and, we did have to go and bring the puppy back, and we did get in some trouble, nothing that lasted or was permanent, but was in the town newspaper, and it became a story. And, it was one of my first strikes on the football team. The coach really didn't like that. But that was a time in my life when I was smoking a lot of pot, and I was drinking a lot, and I was abusing pills. And so that's kind of the deeper part of the story from that time of my life. Really, what the symptom that represented was that I was very much a people pleaser and very much betraying myself, always just looking for love and wanting to belong, to the point that I would actually put myself in very dangerous situations with friends or even on my own, I think, because I felt like I had something to prove, or I felt inadequate, or I felt insecure. And so I had built up this armor and this ego that was really not healthy for me, this persona where, you say like that I was smiling, I'm sitting there happy with the puppy, but deep down I was actually betraying myself and stuck in a very self-destructive pattern and period of my life. And so I was running from, emotional pain from my upbringing. I was running from insecurities. I was running from not knowing how to talk about my feelings or my needs or express myself or feeling safe with anybody or knowing who to talk to or who to ask for help. And so, like I mentioned, I was every day smoking pot all day. I was selling drugs. I was drinking all the time. I was popping pills all the time, always trying to feel better than I felt unconsciously, always trying to access higher states of consciousness, but I never learned how to do that in healthy ways. And then I was just trying to fit in and thrive socially because I didn't love and accept myself enough to just stand in my truth and in my power and my authenticity, because I didn't have a lot of support around that. And I just didn't know. I just didn't know how.
So if you were to try to draw a line back and to look at like your childhood self, little Blake, and the type of child you were, the environment you were raised in, can you draw it back to a point of where you felt not enough, or that you had to people please to receive that love and validation? Where do you think it comes back to?
Well, for me, I think it was just the environment that I was born into. I grew up around a lot of drug addiction, a lot of people who were suffering mentally and emotionally, and then also in their relationships. And then obviously I came to learn that, people can only love you to the degree that they really love themselves. And so I grew up around people that were struggling with their own health, mental, emotional, and physical health, and their own addictions. And so as kids, we take it personally, even though it's not personal, and we internalize it. And so I just grew up with these insecurities. And then my dad struggled with drug addiction into his late 60s. And so for most of his adult life. And so he wasn't present. And then he really wasn't in my life. And I think for me, that created what I could now name as abandonment issues. And so I learned to abandon myself in exchange for belonging, acceptance, and love. So that's kind of the root of it. But I think it's something that, was passed down from generation to generation in my family. And now because I've worked with so many people, it's passed down in every family and every generation because everybody is struggling to understand what is healthy love and what is healthy love for myself. I think it's the ultimate life lesson while we're here on the planet.
I completely agree with you. I don't know anybody who gets to have the privilege of aging and growing old who hasn't picked up some emotional battle wounds along the way. I think it's part of our soul contract here on this earth. We are going to have these adverse experiences, but a lot of the time, to your point, unfortunately, if our primary caregiver hasn't done the work, then they pass it down. And I come from a long line of alcoholism on both sides of my family tree, a generational trauma. And, it's not about blaming, but it is about acknowledging, recognizing, and then we become responsible to be the ones to do the work to change that so we don't pass it on to our children or our nieces and nephews or whoever that may be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. In all of this turmoil and this almost, I feel like I want to say word escapism, desire to be out of your body, you found sport, didn't you? What impact did that have?
It was my refuge, from everything going on at home. And I think it was where I found brotherhood. I think now a lot about the concept of initiation and how we don't have a lot of healthy forms of initiation in modern culture where a boy becomes a man or a girl becomes a woman. And so sports was very much that, I think, for me and for a lot of the guys I know. It's kind of an initiation into a brotherhood, but also into an adulthood or manhood, but typically in a very dysfunctional way. But I grew up playing hockey, like American ice hockey and soccer. And then when I got to high school, I really wanted to play football. And then what it grew into is I was always in the gym and I was very strong, and my muscles became my armor for my ego to protect my very sensitive heart and soul. So I built up all these layers and all this armor of physical muscle to protect a very sensitive, traumatized, insecure heart and soul. So part of my healing was to let go of that armor and to let those walls come down. So, but sport was like meditation became sport for many years was my saving grace because it was a way for me to channel my emotion and my mental energy into something that was actually productive in many ways. And I look back and I think I'm so grateful for the habits of being an athlete, the training, the devotion, the commitment, the consistency, all those things then translate into, I think, your adult and professional life. And I think a lot of my friends who were athletes are successful because they have good routines and they know they have discipline and they know about goal setting and endurance and things like that. So it served me in many ways, even though there was also a shadow and some dysfunction around it for me too.
And then at the same time, you still had that alcohol addiction playing out sort of at the same time simultaneously. I really relate to that as well, being high functioning, being able to achieve in certain areas of my life, but then having these habits that, substance abuse issues, things that were always kind of holding me back from my full potential. And for you, this ended up in a DUI, didn't it?
Yes, I was actually arrested a couple times before it got that bad, for drug possession and just, being young and reckless and stupid. But when I was 17 during the summer going into year 12, into senior year, I was out drinking all night, and I used to drink a lot, and had taken 2 Xanax pills and had been smoking cannabis all night and then was driving. And I used to do this all the time. And I had this big ego, and I thought I was invincible and that I could get away with anything. And one night I was driving home like I did all the time and had done, many nights already that week and that summer. And I got to a freight train in the middle of the night at, say, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was literally 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes from home. And I couldn't keep my eyes open as the train was passing. And I had pulled up to the guardrail. And thankfully I put my car in park and I put my head back and I fell asleep. And I woke up to police knocking on the window, and I rolled down the window and I said, "Excuse me, officer, was I driving too slow?" And he said, "Son, you've been parked here for at least an hour with the lights on and the car running. We got a call from this house over here." So I got arrested, and I had substances in my car, which was obviously not very smart. And I got a DUI. And then that was the summer going into senior year. And I was at the top of my athletic game at that time. I was co-captain of the varsity football team year 12 with my 2 best friends with offers to play college football. And we had just finished our 3rd game of the season, and I was playing at the best I've ever played, doing very well. And my coach calls me into the office and he said, "So what happened during the summer?" And, my stomach dropped and my heart dropped. And he said, "I just talked to the police chief. I had no idea what had happened." And he said, you're not fit to be the captain of this team and you can't play anymore." And so my whole ego, my whole identity, and my whole world just like blew up within, the blink of an eye. And I mean, obviously I self-sabotaged. I created that at the time. I, couldn't see it right away. And it just was heartbreaking and soul crushing for me. And so that was the beginning of my true spiral into my rock bottom, because who I thought Blake was gone. I felt ashamed in my community. It was in the newspapers, all my friends' parents, my girlfriend, all their friends. I just felt so ashamed of myself and bad about myself. And then it was my routine. I didn't know what to do with myself every day. I thought I was going to go to college and probably play. So I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. So now I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was going to do moving forward. I wasn't hanging out with my friends every day. I felt ashamed to even be with my girlfriend. I felt unlovable, and so I just spiraled into such a terrible place. But it was such a blessing in disguise, because that was the beginning of my awakening and seeking for true healing and true purpose, which I became extremely serious about at 18 and eventually found the answers that I was looking for, which was such a blessing.
It's such a young age to embark on a spiritual journey. When I think of the conversations, the people I meet, especially in recovery spaces, like, I'm really surprised, Blake, that you didn't turn further and harder into drugs and alcohol when you were already on that downward spiral. Tell me, what was it about you and your story and your personality that at such a young age you went, "No, I'm not continuing down this path, and I'm going to embark on something that's a lot deeper and a lot more spiritual"?
It's a combination of a lot of factors. So one is my biological father had struggled with drug addiction his whole adult life. So I looked at him as an addict who wasn't there for me, wasn't a good dad or a good husband because of his addiction. I'm not saying he's a bad person. Then I had uncles who were extremely successful, but completely ruined their lives because of drugs and alcohol. They hurt their kids, ruined their marriages. So this theme that I grew up around. It was all around me. And then I had an older brother who actually later passed away, who had an addiction to heroin. And so I watched him struggling with that. But I had this ego, this part of my identity where I actually thought I was better than all of them. I thought I was doing better and I could handle it, and that I wasn't like them. And then when I screwed everything up that meant the most to me, that mattered to me, and that I identified with, I realized that I was just following in the footsteps of my bloodline and my environment and my genetics. And I had the healthy side of my pride, the healthy side of my ego kicked in and was like, this is not my life. I am better than this. There's something more here for me. And so that's the thing that kicked in, was that I wanted to be able to respect myself. I didn't want to wake up and feel ashamed of who I was. And this desire to respect myself became so strong. And then I had this, and I knew that all the pain I had just created all came from these self-destructive habits. And so I was like, I have to put an end to this. And I think that's when I started to develop a relationship to the universe or to a higher power. And I would start to pray a lot and ask for help and connect to the universe. And I think in my heart, I had been humbled so completely that this purity really took over inside of me, this genuine cry for help. And I didn't feel like I could get it from the humans around me, but I felt like I could get it from life or from nature or from some kind of higher power. And so that was when basically every day I started waking up just asking, how do I heal myself? Because deep down, I felt like life wasn't meant to be so painful. Like I just had this voice, this knowing inside of me. And then I also felt like I had to be on the earth for some reason, but I had no idea what. And I had seen people in my family make money and materialism their God. I had seen people in my family make drugs and alcohol and numbing out their God. I had seen people chasing toxic love and make the partner their God. And so I was like, I can't do what they've done, but I don't know what else to do. So my true north became, how do I free myself from suffering? And just what am I doing on the planet? And over time, those actually became the same thing, was that I was on the planet to free myself from suffering and to actually share what I was learning with other people. And so
Wow.
that's kind of the combination of influences. I mean, some people, everybody's got such different belief systems. Some people believe we choose our life before we're born. Some people believe we have contracts with the universe or with other souls. So, a lot of people say it makes sense that you decided to come in at a young age and suffer so much so that you could heal and wake up early and then help a lot of people. And it's a nice story. It feels good. But for me, it was, and I feel like you'll get this, for me, it was heal or die. It wasn't learning to love myself. Meditation, yoga was not like a hobby or vanity or because it was cool. This was over 2 decades ago. So when I started doing it, people were like, Blake is really weird. Like, he's meditating, he's going to yoga, he's lost all this weight, he's eating salads, like from the salad bar. Like, people are like, he's weird. He's not drinking anymore. He's not doing drugs anymore. But I learned that if I didn't have me, I had nothing. So I had to learn to show up for myself because my friends really couldn't show up for me. My family couldn't show up for me. And even some of the people I thought could be my mentors didn't know how to show up for me. So I had to learn to trust myself and become my own best friend. And that was really the hardest part and became the path.
There's so much in that. I admire the radical responsibility that you took to really realize that you were the only one that was going to save yourself and to not fall into that trap that so many people get stuck in of blaming others or blaming circumstance or environment and so on and so forth. Like, I feel like you really took ownership of that at a young age. I'm curious to know, for me, yoga found me at the exact time that I was ready for it. And I believe that that's what this practice does. What led you to these Eastern philosophies? I know you've explored so many of them now. Can you share a little bit more about that and just the deep impact it's had on your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was 18, moved away to go to school. So that was the beginning of this process. And I still was feeling lost. So I was working and studying and trying to figure out what the next steps were. And the only part of my identity that I had left was my physical body. So I would continue to go to the gym and work out. And so I can't translate it quickly into kilos, but right now I'm probably about 185, 190 pounds. When I was 18, I was like 205 or 210 pounds of muscle. I squatted over 500 pounds, bench press close to 300 pounds, like an absolute meathead, but it was all ego and it was not healthy for me. And so I was in the gym one day when I was 18 and I used to never do my core enough. So it was a lot of vanity, right? Big chest, big arms, big legs, but I didn't do my core enough. And I didn't realize at the time that one of the reasons I avoided my core was because that's where all my repressed emotions and trauma were. And so one day I was in the gym lifting too much weight and I completely herniated 2 discs in my back. And I fell to the ground, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't get up. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't sleep. I don't know if you've ever herniated discs in your back. It was the
No.
worst pain ever, and nothing you do can get comfortable. But that was my body stopping me from that final pattern, that habit that was destroying me, that wasn't good for me because I was too aggressive, too hard on my body, but I didn't know what else to do. And so when I started to heal my lower back, that's when I first went for acupuncture, and I experienced
Mm-hmm.
acupuncture for the first time and the energy flowing through my body. And then I started to go to hot yoga, and that was actually how I rehabilitated my back. And I became a yogi starting at 18 and ended up going to hot yoga anywhere from 5 to 7 days a week because I needed some form of exercise and training. And then I went from 205 or 210 pounds down to about 160 pounds. So I lost 50 pounds, something like that. A lot of it muscle. That's when I began reading Buddhist philosophy and Hindu philosophy and yogic philosophy, and then all kinds of philosophy, and then started getting into reading books like The Secret and The Power of Now, and just every perspective on energy, quantum physics, all the sciences, epigenetics, just trying to understand everything and anything I could about what was going on inside of me, what was going on around me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how yoga found me. And then this is the really important distinction. I would wake up feeling terrible, tortured mentally and emotionally. And then I would get to yoga during the day and take the practice very seriously, and it would help me a lot. But then typically by the evening time, my unhealthy thinking would come back on very strong. And I had a lot of paranoia and self-doubt from all my drug use, from smoking so much pot and taking so many pills. And so I was just never really comfortable inside of myself. So this was this like pattern. I would wake up feeling terrible. I'd have a salad, a smoothie, go to yoga during the day, feel better. Then in the evening, I would again feel tortured. And then one day I wandered into a Buddhist meditation center, and that's when I sat down and I learned to actually train my mind. And that was this big turning point for me, when, like, going back to how we started, when I could practice in the morning and then wake up and not have my mind so active and feel so tortured mentally and emotionally, but I could actually stand up and feel like my heart was open and I was present and I didn't feel like I had to run. And so I just followed that thread, of what felt good in my body, what felt good in my heart, what felt good in my soul, knowing that intrinsically that couldn't be bad. I wasn't doing anything bad or wrong, even though it wasn't considered normal, and it was weird to a lot of people at that point. Now it's trendy, but it wasn't as trendy over 20 years ago. So.
Yeah. And you're a really big advocate for self-love. It's something that I know you talk to a lot, specifically as it pertains to our health and well-being, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. Can you talk to that a little bit more? Why are you so passionate about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. So from that point on, I ended up going to 5 different universities where I studied all the sciences, psychology, neuroscience. And then I went on to study Chinese medicine, so acupuncture and Oriental medicine. And that intellectual pursuit was hand in hand with my personal healing and my personal growth. And eventually what I realized was that all the time and money I spent going to 5 universities and then seeking out all these gurus and teachers and reading hundreds of books on self-help and God and religion and spirituality and natural medicine was actually me just learning how to love myself and looking for love. And to make that practical, I was looking for the love I didn't get as a child. I was looking for the love that I never learned to give myself. I was looking for the love that intuitively I knew would heal me eventually. But what I didn't realize was that I was the love that I was looking for. And I think that's true for all of us, that we are the love that we're looking for. And the source of love is covered up by all the years of pain and self-destruction from not knowing how to love ourselves. So from all the self-betrayal, all the negative self-talk, all the keeping in of our emotions and our needs and holding ourselves back and letting fear and guilt and shame and self-doubt stop us from living in integrity and alignment. And so from all my training, I could see how not loving ourselves, meaning internalizing our emotions and our needs on a daily basis, all the negative self-talk, and then all the negative self-destructive habits that come from that process
Wow.
actually was the root cause of physical illness and mental and emotional pain. And so when I had that clarity, I wanted to share it with as many people as I could because I was so desperate to understand that. And so that's why this became such a passion for me, because I didn't love myself. I didn't like myself. I didn't know how to love myself. I went on this quest to figure that out. And I realized that all my self-destructive behavior was actually a cry for love in this search for love. And that we're all actually going through that. And so today I have a lot of surgeons, a lot of doctors, a lot of psychiatrists, a lot of CEOs come to me because they don't know how to love themselves. They don't teach it in medical school. They don't teach it in business school. When you become a psychologist, they're really not teaching that. But that's deep. That's what we're really all trying to figure out.
It's so true, isn't it, Blake? Like, if we really whittle it all down, you can give it every other label under the sun. But the truth is, I think we are all on this deep search of self-love and self-acceptance. And I think sometimes that doesn't land for people because it can seem a little bit woo-woo or a little bit unattainable. And as you were talking, I was just thinking, it's so true. All of these other behaviors, whether it's people pleasing or needing to control life, all of these things that we do to try and manipulate and get our way through life. And there's this real heavy kind of harsh energy to it, all comes from this sense of lack. And I think about my own journey and how much of that has fallen away because through this process of getting sober, stepping onto a spiritual path, I have started to deeply love myself. I hated myself when I first came into recovery. I couldn't bear to look at myself, so full of shame and distrust and guilt. And, it has been a long journey, but over time, those old behaviors have started to fall away. But, I'm thinking even about some of my clients at the moment, and I know that this has been a lifelong challenge for them as well. This idea of someone says, well, you just need to work on loving yourself more. But it's like, but how, Blake? How do we actually do that?
We can dive into it if you want. So
Yeah, I'd love to.
thankfully, it's not that complicated. We just make it complicated. And so the way I like to break it down for people, especially people who think this is woo-woo or unattainable, that is not true. That's a limiting belief. And so we want to call everybody on that. And that can actually be an excuse to stay stuck in your patterns, to think, oh, it's unattainable. Maybe it is for Ash and Blake, but not for me. And I just want to call BS because this is attainable for everybody. But the implications of it can be very challenging. So one of the high level questions that's really powerful to ask, and this is great for everybody to ask themselves, is if I were to value myself 100% today in every situation and relationship, what would I say and what would I do? And so most people will start to think, if I really valued myself, I would say this to this person. If I really valued myself 100%, I would not put up with this. I would do X, Y, and Z, right? So again, if I valued myself 100% today, what would I say? What would I do? How would I do it? How would I carry myself? And very quickly, you get to see where you're stuck and where you're blocked, and then what all your limiting beliefs are about why you will not value yourself 100% today in every situation and relationship. Okay, so this is just high level. Then to break this down practically, if you think about it, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, all of us, we're either hurting ourselves with our thoughts and our habits, or we're taking really good care of ourselves and we're loving ourselves. And there are laws of nature, like the laws of physics, that govern an optimal, healthy relationship to your mind, your heart, and your body on a daily basis from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. And it's not that complicated. And the first one is taking care of your mind, like we were talking about. Like, if you don't take care of your mind on a daily basis, which is an act of self-love, you're hurting yourself and you're letting yourself be hurt by your unhealthy thinking, your limiting beliefs, the negativity that you allow in your life. So taking care of your mind, AKA practicing meditation first thing in the morning, is a really good example of one of the habits that is a secret to loving yourself. So if someone wants to know how to love themselves, they have to learn how to take care of their mind. And meditation is one of the most important ways to do that. And going back to that, just to keep that full, is I've learned that if we don't go to the core of our mind where thoughts begin, where our identity and our psyche bubbles up, like the origin of thought, the origin of identity, there's always an aspect of us that feels like a victim and we feel powerless because we're not actually training our mind at the core of our mind and going to the root of the problem. And so you can't think your way out of this. You have to go to another level of consciousness. So taking care of your mind is one of the keys. The next one, which is a big doozy, which comes up when I ask the question, if you were to value yourself 100% today in every situation and relationship, the second habit is being honest and kind in every situation. So if like you think about today, am I being honest, like 100% in integrity, but also kind in every situation and relationship? And so for a lot of people, when they start to heal and want to feel empowered, they swing to the self-righteous side and they get into the F you, I have boundaries now, you can't talk to me like that. And a lot of people end up pushing everybody away initially because we don't know how else to honor and value ourselves. But there's a middle way. And I'm sure you've heard of the topic of nonviolent communication. And so that's a huge habit for self-love, is learning to be honest and kind in every situation where it's the hardest to be honest and kind. So there's more habits, but those are two huge ones: taking care of your mind on a daily basis, and then learning to be honest and kind in every relationship and situation, which is very challenging because we're so scared of hurting people, or we're so used to pushing people away and using language that's very hurtful and very unconscious and very reactive. And then we try and be honest and kind, but the person is not honest and kind back. So then we think we just want to fight back, right? And then, and feel free to interrupt me in any moment. The other big one that this then translates into is to act in integrity, right? So from the moment we wake up till the moment we go to bed, we're either in alignment with our true feelings, needs, and calling and purpose and soul, or we're going against ourselves. And most of us spend a lot of our days going against ourselves because we've been trained to betray ourselves to survive. And you know, when I'm teaching, I will often ask the room, I'll say, how many people of you believe you chose your parents before you were born? And then I'll ask, how many of you people think there's no effing way I would have chosen my parents? And there's always an equal number of people that say, I think I did choose my parents because they were the perfect teachers for me in this lifetime. And then there's half the group thinks there's no way I would ever have chosen these people. But either way, as kids, a lot of us feel like we end up in environments that we didn't choose, forced to be with people we didn't want to be with, doing things we didn't want to be doing, focused on things that we don't want to be focused on. And then we have to go to school and be with other kids we don't necessarily like or want to be with, and study things we may not like or want to study. And then if you think about it, people do that up until 18. And then if they go to a job, right, that they don't love, then they're doing it with that. And then a lot of people get married because they think they're just supposed to get married, or they should just have babies because that's what you do, right? And so many people are used to feeling one thing, needing one thing, wanting one thing, but doing the opposite.
And that then becomes like the regulated nervous system. Like that state is what feels safe, even though they're highly dysregulated because they're not in alignment, but that's all they know.
And that's autoimmune disease, for example, where the body is always fighting itself because you're at war with yourself inside all the time. And that's why people get sick and they think, where did the lump in my breast come from? Where did the lupus come from? Where did the autoimmune disease come from? Where did that lump, where did my prostate issues come from? Where did the cancer come from? It's been creeping up from so many years of rejecting yourself, betraying yourself, going against your true feelings, needs, desire, nature, calling, rhythm, all the things that no one teaches us because our parents didn't know better, our teachers don't know better, our doctors don't know better. So it's like this is just getting passed down from generation to generation because we just don't know better.
For somebody who's listening along right now who perhaps isn't sure how to to check in? Because like if this was me, say 8 years ago, and I was hearing you talk, Blake, I didn't know how to trust my gut because I was still, I was drinking every day. I was so disconnected from self. I had all the armor on. And so that connection that I now have to my gut, which is just lightning fast, and I can feel into my intuition really quickly. For those who aren't there yet, how do you start to create that sense of inner knowing so that you can really feel into that feedback from the body?
Yes, absolutely. So again, I'm going to go back to, and I'm sure I sound like a broken record, is meditation first thing in the morning. And you only need 10 minutes. And I don't know if you share show notes, but I have a free 10 to 15 minute meditation that's very powerful if you want to share it with your
absolutely
community. And so
Thank
first
you.
thing in the morning, 10 minutes of meditation. And then this video or this type of meditation is something you can do any time of day. So instead of being on your phone or watching a show or anything like that, you're just focused on your breathing, your body. So you're reconnecting with what's true for you inside. I think another great thing, and this can be in the morning or in the evening, is journaling. I would imagine you've done a lot of journaling. And so just taking a minute, taking 5 to 10 minutes to write, dear universe, dear higher power, today I'm feeling ... I really need help with ... I'm really struggling. Back when I started doing this, when I was 18, I had this black notebook. And I remember writing all this darkness that was stuck inside of me. And I would write like, dear God, dear universe, I'm really suffering. I'm really struggling. I have this shame. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel alone. I feel like everybody else is normal and okay, but there's something wrong with me. And I remember it's mind blowing. I actually drove past this the other day. I was in Colorado. This is where this happened. When I was 18, I had this notebook that I'd filled it up and it was done. There was no more pages. And I remember thinking at that time, because I didn't have perspective yet, I don't want anybody to ever see this, ever. And I also don't ever want to read that this even existed. Like, I want this out of me. I want it gone. I want to forget it. And I remember the exact garbage can that I threw this diary in when I was 18. And I literally drove by it a couple weeks ago in Colorado because I'm in that area all the time. And it's funny because it used to be like an old, simple garbage can, and now it's like a bougie, new garbage can. And I often wish I had that diary to go back. But right, so journaling is really good. Today, we live in a time where there's lots of online therapy apps, for example, and you can get a therapist for pretty cheap. So like, it took me a long time to ask for help. And I think that you can save yourself a lot of years, not just days and weeks, but years, even decades of suffering just by reaching out and asking for help. And so you can find a therapist. I don't know who's serving in Australia the best right now, but like in America, we have BetterHelp and we have Talkspace. I don't know if they're also in Australia, but you can get a therapist for pretty reasonable. You could even stay anonymous and just talk to them on the phone. And it's really important to just start getting it out. And just by sharing what you're going through in a safe container, because a lot of us have never felt safe with anybody, a lot of healing begins to happen just by saying, I'm confused. I'm a mess. I'm drinking too much. I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I'm lost. And so just overcoming the fear around admitting those things and talking to someone safe who's going to keep you in a positive regard and be supportive is so healing. So those are a couple things that come to mind. I think yoga, getting in touch with your body, a slow practice is probably really good.
Amen. Amen to all of that. Thank you, Blake. I really appreciate you sharing those nuggets. So another question that I had for you, a lot of our community here on the podcast are on some sort of recovery journey, whether they are in sobriety or they're sober curious, trying to remove these substances. And many of the people I work with carry a lot of guilt, shame, and remorse because of their past behaviors. And I want to know, with your experience, how do we start to rebuild self-trust and confidence on this journey?
Yeah. So it's a great question. Thankfully, again, the answer is not that complicated, which is why I keep beating the same horse, which is in the morning when you wake up, if you don't trust your mind, you can't trust yourself. So you have to train your mind. And this is why I keep coming back. We have to train our mind to trust ourselves, because then let's say you and I are in a relationship. If I haven't trained my mind in the morning and you're in a bad mood and I get triggered, I'm going to be quick to react and say something I don't mean, or you'll be quick to react and say something you don't mean. But if I practice meditation in the morning and I'm connected to my breath and you're having a bad day, instead of me reacting and saying something I don't mean, I might just take a deep breath and be able to find the words to not make the problem worse. And
True.
so it's like all trust in self and relationship gets eroded because you don't trust yourself. And the root begins with, I don't trust myself because I don't trust my mind. Then I don't trust myself because I don't trust myself to be true to my emotions on a moment by moment, situation by situation basis. And so that's why those habits that I started to outline are so important, which is if I take care of my mind every day, find a way to take care of my mind, I will trust myself more. If I find a way to understand and be aware of what am I feeling today? What do I need? What do I want? How do I express it honestly and kindly? I'm going to trust myself more, right? If I act in integrity with what I feel and need and want and what my soul's truth is, I'm going to trust myself more. The reason we don't trust ourselves, or anybody listening doesn't trust themselves, is because they've been betraying themselves since they were children. And so I have to stop betraying myself. How do I stop betraying myself? Well, if I valued myself 100% today in every situation and relationship, what would I say and what would I do? I
love that question so much.
It's very powerful. In Christianity, and I'm not religious, it's, the saying like, what would Jesus do? What would love do? Right? But what if you valued yourself? What would love do? Right? What if you valued yourself and you knew you were 100% worthy and you knew that everything was going to be okay and you actually trusted life and you valued yourself 100%, what would you say and what would you do? And now the other hack to this that I think is really important is, this was kind of my secret. I have a very addictive personality. And so when I was young, my addictive personality was on the things that were bad for me. And then, for example, coffee became one of those bridges for me. It was less bad for me. I enjoyed it a lot, but it wasn't like alcohol and it wasn't like cannabis and it wasn't like pills. But then yoga became an addiction for me, and meditation became an addiction for me, and supplements and herbs became an addiction for me, and optimal nutrition and superfood smoothies became an addiction for me. And what all this means is a lot of us don't know what makes us feel alive and well and raises our vibration. So I think asking the question, what makes me feel healthy? What makes me feel strong? What makes me feel alive and well? And that could be going for a walk. It could be riding your bike. It could be swimming. It could be going to Pilates. It could be going to bar. It could be going to your favorite dance class. It could be doing ecstatic dance. So what's healthy for me that makes me feel alive and well? And, what do I eat? When I eat this food, I feel better than if I eat the fried food or the carbs and the sugar. And if you can just focus on the things that make you feel stronger, healthier, more well, your vibration stronger, your energy is going to get stronger and you're going to raise your vibration. Your life force is going to get stronger. And what happens organically, especially if you've been suffering, is naturally you don't want to put anything in your body that brings your energy down. You don't want to be around people that bring your energy down. You don't want to go to the pub because it brings your energy down. You don't want to be with the friend that's always negative and complaining and their life is terrible because it brings your energy down. So if you start thinking in terms of what habits, activities, substances bring my energy up and aren't associated with a crash, like there's no come down, there's no side effects, there's no hangover. Because some people will say, no, well, Blake, I love wine. It makes me feel good. But but you're numbing out and you don't feel good in the morning, right? So, but you might enjoy a cup of tea. You might enjoy catching up with a friend who is a good person, who has good energy. You might enjoy, going to hear some live music or reading a book in a cafe, or right, there's all these other options, all these other habits that we just haven't been exposed to. So just getting curious. What makes me feel alive and well? What makes me feel like myself? What makes me feel connected to myself and to other good humans? And if you can focus a little more on that, you'll then naturally be like, when I have the drink, it actually brings me down and I don't want to feel that way anymore. And it becomes very natural. Like I actually want to take care of myself. It becomes
Mm.
this like intuitive, instinctual shift. Does that resonate?
Oh, it resonates so deeply. I love that, especially the idea of being in control of your energy and choosing and being mindful. Is this depleting me or is this recharging me? And we have the choice, particularly I think with around who you choose to spend time with. You know, my classes last week, I was really talking about the energy in the world right now. It's feeling very chaotic, very overwhelming, very noisy, and you have a choice, because when that collective energy gets louder, it can almost feel easier just to fall in with the masses and to join into those conversations and watch news media and really start to spiral. It may feel a little more resistant to actually turn inward and to tap out of that noise, but it's a choice. And I know for me, my partner and I, we're not really watching news media at the moment, but we both have a meditation practice. We're coming back to ourselves on a daily basis. And as a result of that, feeling a lot calmer about life. When I speak to people and they ask how I am on a day-to-day basis, I'm, pretty good and pretty chill. Things are okay. And yet some people right now are really, really struggling because they're getting pulled into that energetic field of chaos and carnage. And yeah, I think it's so important to remember that we do have a choice around that. I love what you said about the journaling as well. Like perhaps that's all you need to journal of an evening even. Where today was my energy depleted and where was it recharged? And just starting to really check in and notice and start to see as well, because I think consistency plays a big part in all of these practices. Because if you start to journal every single night, just that one question, you'll start to see patterns as well. And I think that's really important for us to be able to identify the patterns so that we can really get clear on where we need to make the change. And then the last thing I wanted to add with, talking about coming back to that idea of self-trust. One thing I know for me that's really helped me build self-trust is showing up for my practices consistently. Not picking up a drink one day at a time has been a great way to build self-trust, but then actually when I say I'm going to meditate this morning, actually going and meditating. So all of these little micro actions done consistently can really help to develop all of that as well. So yes, absolutely. I want to echo everything you've said just then. I thought it was fantastic. Blake, we're coming towards the end of our conversation, which makes me terribly sad because I absolutely have loved talking to you today. But there's a final question that we ask all of our guests. I'd love to ask you now. Could you please share with us? I think I know what one of them is going to be. Could you please share with us what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
That's a great question. I would say getting good sleep is really important to me, because I
Yeah.
can't really function or think clearly if I'm not sleeping well. And I don't know, a lot of people talk about that. And I just think as we age, you just realize how important your sleep
Yes.
really is. And it really is on a spiritual level, physically, energetically, emotionally. It just affects everything. So I think getting good sleep, working out every day. I like to move my body and move my energy every day is really important to me, because I do think a lot and I do have a lot of responsibilities. So making sure I take time for self-care for myself, one form of that is physical exercise in whatever way I feel, is right that day. And then, everything I speak about has been from my own suffering, really. And so for me, being able to just be honest and talk about my feelings and my needs and know that I'm worthy of having my feelings and that I'm worthy of having my needs is a way that I actually, and this translates into everything, is a way that I cherish myself. And it's really important. I want to be cherished by the people around me that I pour into. So giving myself permission to be myself in every situation, even when it gets scary, even when I'm scared I'm going to lose someone or I'm going to upset someone. And so that's really been one of my biggest lessons of like not betraying myself and not rejecting myself. So every day I have to do that, or else I'm tortured by that situation every day until I address it. And so, over time, you cannot stay out of alignment for long. Like you just can't. Not possible. It's like you're driving in the lane, and if you're swerving into the other lane, you are gonna crash. And so
Yeah.
you need to course correct back into alignment. And I just look back at like all my most painful lessons come from me not honoring that, and then all the best things come from me honoring that. So
What a perfect place to finish our conversation today. Blake, I just know that our listeners are going to want to track you down. So where is the best place for them to go?
I think Instagram is great, which is just Blake D as in Daniel, Blake D Bauer. And then my website is unconditional-selflove.com. And that's probably a good place to start. I've got links everywhere. So, or just Google. You just put my name in Google.
Well, I'm going to make sure I link everything in the episode show notes. We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one need suffer in silence. So I just want to say thank you so much for not only your time today, Blake.
Thank you, Ash. You too. You're doing amazing work too.